I was frustrated with God because I said, why have you not answered my prayer? I had prayed so many times, please cure me of this messiness issue. Please make me organized. And I was crying out to God in my heart, and I was saying, God, why will you not fix me? Why won't you answer my prayers? Because it's keeping me from doing the thing that I felt like God was calling me to do, which was to write.
Welcome to Hope Talks. We're your hosts. I'm Haley Scully, along with Dustin Anderson, and we want to give you every reason for hope for every challenge in life, because hope means everything. Okay, well, Dustin, it is guest day on Hope Talks. Dana K. White, thank you for joining us today. We're glad you're here.
Thanks for having me on. This is really fun.
Absolutely. Well, we have had fun so far. It is a windy day where you are and where we are. So there may be times that our Wi-Fi drags a little bit, but whatever the video is doing, we are excited to hear from you today. We first connected with you. You were a speaker at our Hope Together conference last year. And I said, my cousins went to it. I've talked about Mindy and Ryan being at the conference last year, and they loved your workshop. We just love your perspective and what direction you are going in your ministry and work. So Dustin, tell us about her books and kind of a bit about Dana K. White's perspective.
Yeah, I have been so looking forward to this conversation. So Dana K. White, she's an author of several best-selling books, including Decluttering at the Speed of Life and How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. So you're kind of a decluttering, home organization, cleaning kind of expert and coach in this area. You're also the creator of the popular blog and podcast called A Slob Comes Clean, where you share kind of your journey about navigating, clutter and home organization and things like that. Like I said, sought after speaker and coach. You've connected with us through our Hope Together conference last year and coming back again this fall. So I'm looking forward to that. And you also have just released a book called Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House. He Cares About Your Heart.
Amen.
Amen to that. I've been listening to that actually the last couple of weeks, and I've been so encouraged by it.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you.
We'll get into that a little bit. We love hearing people's hope stories, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. Like I said, I have 3 daughters. I was not prepared at all for the amount of clutter and things that would happen in my house, but it's been encouraging to hear from you and your perspective.
Yeah. So Dana, in Hope Talks, one of the things we will love sharing kind of your ministry, your books, what you're speaking about, but we love to hear individuals' hope talks, your hope story. And so the way we pitch that with people is sometimes your hope story, it could have been a time of salvation, or maybe it was another time in your life that you really learned what it meant to put your hope in Christ. And so that could be kind of centered around the work that you're doing now, or just something kind of personal in your heart. I mean, we're not going to ask you to read from your diary. I will try to say that, because as soon as I say something, okay, go ahead and grab it. We'll take a sip of water and you go grab it. But we'd just love to hear your hope story and then kind of share a bit of the perspective about Jesus caring for your heart, not necessarily your mess. So what is the Dana K. White? We are saying that you told us if you just do Dana White, they get the UFC guy, right?
Yeah, he's bald. He's not me.
He's not you. So definitely that's why we keep saying Dana K. White. If people are like, why do they keep saying that? So Dana K. White, what would your hope story be?
Well, I mean, I think it is based around this subject matter, because this was the subject matter that made me feel completely hopeless. I grew up messy. I was always the messy kid. I had the locker in high school that I would open it up and everything fell out. I don't talk about this stuff because it comes naturally to me. It's the opposite. So I was always messy, and yet assumed that at some phase of life, I was going to find this stuff to be easy all of a sudden, right? Like it just felt like it was something that at some point in the future, this won't be a struggle anymore. And a lot of that was because, even though I was messy, I was always involved in other things, and I was generally successful at other things. And I thought, well, it's not my focus right now, right? But once I get married and I care, then it will be easy. Well, guess what happened? When
Yeah.
I got married, it was not all of a sudden easy. And now it wasn't just my stuff, it was my husband's stuff as well. But I still didn't completely despair because I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. That was my goal, right? Like that's what we were planning on doing. And I was like, well, once I'm a stay-at-home mom, of course this will be easy because what else will I have to do? Right? Now I understand that even people who used to be organized, once they have kids, then they struggle, right? But it really was at that point when I had preschoolers, I was at this phase of life that I had always dreamed of being in. I was loving it, except that my house was still a disaster. I actually remember my oldest, who's 23 now. I remember when he was 4 months old. He was 4 months old, so he was not even crawling yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was changing his diaper, and I looked around his room. He's my first kid. Looked around his room, and his room was a mess. And I went, wait a minute. He can't even crawl. Like,
Yeah.
this is not his fault. This is me. This is on me. And I had this moment of realization that, oh, this didn't magically get cured. And it was the first time I thought, I think there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why can't I do this thing that seems to be easy for the rest of the world?
Yeah.
For me, it's really hard. And I actually remember there's a certain talk show, I won't name names, but it's a certain talk show where somebody is supposed to be able to solve all your problems.
Okay.
I remember that my kids were little and they were in that napping stage. And they would run promos for this episode that was coming up where he was going to solve all the problems of this incredibly messy woman, right? And I made sure that I was going to watch that episode. I could not wait because I liked the things that this person said to other people because I was
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, he set them straight. So, he'll set
Mhm.
me straight. So I was going to watch this episode and they went in and they cleaned up this woman's house. And then his big advice for her was, okay, well, we're going to knock on your door one of these days and you don't know when that's going to be. So you better keep it that way. And I
Oh.
went, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like that was going to be the big solution was fear. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, guess what? I could see the woman's eyes. I knew what she was feeling because I was like,
Yeah.
it is never an issue. It was never an issue of me not wanting my house to be under control. It was never an issue of me not working on my house. I was constantly working on my house and I couldn't seem to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So the hope that comes in here, and the hope story is I wanted to be a writer. That was my goal. I thought when my kids are in school, that's what I'm going to try to pursue. And then in 2008, I discovered blogs. You remember blogs, right?
Yeah.
They were the big thing. And I hadn't known what they were before. But as soon as I realized what they were, I thought, this is it. Like, this is the thing. I want to be a writer. I want to have a blog. But I felt like I had to get my house under control first.
Yeah. You got to fix it first.
Because I was like, I know I throw myself into creative projects. It'll just be one more thing to take my focus away from my house. I also didn't want to write and feel like I had to hide what my house looked like because I felt like if anybody knew what my house looked like, they would throw away anything I had said about motherhood or whatever, because it feels like your house is your report card, right? When you're a mom.
Yeah.
And so I was working and trying to get my house under control for a year and a half. I mean, I'd always been trying, but now I had this thing that I really wanted to do that was this new, motivation. And other than the motivation of doing it for the right reasons, but like this was keeping me from doing something and I could not figure it out. And so I was actually sitting in church. It was August of 2009. My second kid, who's now 21, was about to go to kindergarten the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was only going to have one kid at home. And I was like, okay, this is the time when I should start a blog because I won't have to coordinate nap times anymore. And she will, she'll go down for a nap and I could actually write. And I was praying. I was not listening to the sermon, but I was praying and I was frustrated with God because I said, why have you not answered my prayer? I had prayed so many times, please cure me of this messiness issue. Please make me organized. And I was crying out to God in my heart, and I was saying, God, why will you not fix me? Why won't you answer my prayers? Because it's keeping me from doing the thing that I felt like God was calling me to do, which was to write.
Mm.
And God said, and I don't say that often, I don't say it lightly, right?
Right.
But God said, write about that. And I was like, okay, that's actually a really good idea, God. Okay.
Yeah.
But
High five, God.
I was like, okay. And immediately the name of my blog came to me. I didn't want to use the name A Slob Comes Clean, even though it's very catchy, right? Because I had never called myself a slob before. I'd often said, it's not like I'm a slob. I don't like it this way. It's not that I don't work. I work on it all the time. I just couldn't seem to figure it out. I started in the beginning. It was anonymous. I thought it was temporary. I thought it was a practice blog. I didn't even tell my husband what I was doing. I made up a fake name, set up a new email address so no one would ever trace this back to me because this was my shameful secret. And I started writing thinking I would spend a couple of months getting my house under control. It would be a way to stay focused and learn about blogging. And then I would start writing about the things that I was actually, qualified to share with other people. And what I found was a community. I found that I was not the only one out there. And I cannot understate the power of knowing you're not alone
Yeah.
in a struggle is so incredible. And what that ultimately did was, as in the beginning, I was not teaching anything. I was just figuring it out. And as people would say, I thought people were going to say, get off the internet. This is embarrassing, but
Right.
instead people said, me too. These are my thoughts. These are my struggles. These are the things that go through my brain. I saw who these people were, and they were highly creative women. And I saw this relationship between very high levels of creativity. I was a theater arts teacher, so lots of theater arts teachers, lots of, artists and poets, and all that was who was relating to what I was saying. And I saw there's a relationship in my brain between the creativity and this struggle with physical stuff, because I see the world differently. Like, that my brain works differently from the brains of the people who generally write about this stuff, because they have God created them differently. And it helped me to see this is how God made me to work. It's not a mistake that my brain works differently. It's also not an excuse. It doesn't mean that I say, oh, well, because I didn't want my house to be out of control. I wanted my house under control, but it was freedom for me to say, okay, I don't have to feel like a failure because traditional organizing advice doesn't work for me. Instead, I just have to figure out what does work for me and the unique way that God created me and my brain. And so my story of hope really comes out of my story of hopelessness, which I guess everybody's does, right? But this moment of just going, I don't get it, God. What can I do? And it wasn't okay, then I'll make you organized. It was putting me on this path that now this is the thing I write about. It's been 16 something years. This is the thing I write about after about 2.5 years of people begging, please teach us what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And me saying, why would you want to learn this from me? Finally realizing, oh, okay, I can never tell you how to have a perfectly color-coded pantry. Like, that's not my thing. But I can tell you how to go from completely overwhelmed and bewildered and questioning your identity to, oh, okay, this is what you do, and now I know I can do it. So God gave me the thing that I wanted so desperately, which was to write in a much more fulfilling way than it would have been if I was writing about something else or if I was hiding part of me. Instead, I get to embrace this, which ultimately helps people more to feel understood. And it helped me when I started writing in the way that I did, that I felt understood. And now it means a lot to me to be able to give that to other people.
Man, I love that, especially saying you didn't want to use the word slob. Like, there is such a, for some reason, in something that we're not very good at, and I'm sure you were surrounded by the people that are good at it. It's so highlighted, people that their home is just all right and everything's great, and there is such a shame. So tell us, what did it feel like when you went from shame to thinking, oh wait, God is asking me to shine a light on this? So it's like it's from shame to your offering, not feeling like I need to hide this because I'm embarrassed by this, but I'm feeling empowered and I feel like this is what I'm giving to God in shining a light in all these people's lives that have been beating themselves up over this particular topic. How did it go from shame to your offering?
That's a great question. As I worked on my home, I really assumed that the God part of this was going to be him revealing the verse that I had been missing all along that was going to make this really easy, or the spiritual
Yeah.
principle. Like he was going to make me go, oh, I get it now. It's all easy. And instead, at the same time I was working on my home, not coincidentally, but it felt coincidental, I was also really, for the first time, probably about a year before I started what I call my deslobification process with the blog, I had gotten into daily Bible study. I had been a
Mhm.
Christian. I had loved Jesus. I had been a missionary. But like for the first time, I was deeply in the word every single day. And so I assumed he was going to reveal to me the truth about cleaning because it felt like a spiritual failure, right? Like it
Yeah.
felt like, what is wrong with me? This,
Cleanliness is next to godliness.
yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly, which is not in the Bible, but anyway, that's the subject of the
Sure.
next book, the book that just came out. But I just assumed that, and instead, what God was really, really getting through to me was who I am, who he is, and what the relationship between us is, which is all righteousness comes from God. Like it is purely what Jesus has already done for me. And this
Right.
idea of self-sufficiency and striving that ultimately keeps me from relationship with God. Anytime I think it's what I'm doing or what I'm not doing that is the basis of our relationship, I'm off track, right? Like
Yeah.
so that reality of grace and who God is what he was showing me.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
Paul talks about his thorn that he begged God to remove. I mean, that
Yeah.
is very familiar to me and is familiar to everyone because we all have something. We have a weakness, right?
Right.
And God says, no, because my power is made perfect through your weakness. And it showed me the purpose of weakness, right?
Yeah.
And that also in Second Corinthians, but Paul talks about the jars of clay, right? The image there, I had always kind of thought of the cracks in the jars of clay, and I don't think I really grasped what the point was, but the cracks in the jars of clay, like we are not meant to be strong. We are meant to be weak, and the cracks are there so that the Holy Spirit living inside of us can be seen as he shines through those cracks. And that really meant a lot to me as I was studying because I realized I like to look really smart and amazing. I mean, I like to look like I have it all together.
Right.
I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way, but I do feel like maybe excessively. That has always been my struggle, is this pride.
Yeah.
And yet God had given me the desires of my heart to be a writer, but he'd given it to me around my deep, dark, shameful secret, so it definitely helps keep the pride in check for sure. But
Yeah.
it's the purpose, the cracks, showing my weakness, being honest about my weakness is how I can point people to God. If I
Right.
am trying to be, all put together and have it all together and come across as perfect and impenetrable and all that kind of stuff, then I'm not pointing people to Jesus. And so that was the shift for me, was that realization that there was purpose in the way that he made my brain. There is a reason that this struggle was so intense for me that I was willing to write about it.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Put it
if I
out
wasn't
there.
so desperate to write, which I believe God gave me that desperation,
Mhm.
and this was not such a huge thing, then I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And this is my mission field.
I
It's
love it.
my opportunity to share real, true help the way that Jesus did. I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus didn't say, okay, believe in me and then I'll help you. I mean, he
Right.
handed out help to people who didn't appreciate it at all, what he was really there for. But But like, this is a very felt need for so many people. And by being able to meet that need, I have very real relationships with lots of people on the internet, and
Yeah.
for a lot of them, I am their only Christian friend. This new book that just came out, I had a lot of non-Christians who read it, and they're like, I can't believe I'm reading a Christian book, but we're
Wow.
friends.
Oh, that's great.
So,
Yeah.
That's
so they
great.
read it.
There's two things, images that are kind of coming to mind for me. Like, one, like if you're in a boat, I don't know why I have a lot of boat imagery.
Let's hear it.
Boats
But
are great.
unfortunately, I say steer the ship, and I keep getting people telling me or no, I say drive the ship, and people are
Oh.
like, no, you steer the ship. But anyways, let's be in a boat. Imagine, if you will. And if you're really bad at rowing the boat, but you keep trying, and there's some expectation that I'm supposed to row this boat and I can't do it. And it's just shame and guilt, and you feel bad about yourself. But like you're saying, it's not that God is saying you have to figure out how to row the boat. He's like, let me help you row the boat. I understand that you're weak here, and you can lean into me in this. And the boat starts to get rowed because we're set free of the thought that we're earning his goodness, like, so the shame kind of falls off. Like, so that's one thing. Like, I don't know why the boat, but the row your boat. I'm not going to sing row, row, row your boat, although I am tempted to sing it. The other thing, like for me in that way, when God called me to do training and teaching, like internationally, and I was trying to all of a sudden be and do all these things that I didn't know how to be and do. And when I was doing that in other places, in other languages, and they were translating, like I couldn't have, if that was my messy house, there's no way I could have figured it out enough to do it. But it was like coming to the end of me and saying, okay, the only way there is going to be value in this is if it is true that you are faithful to accomplish in and through me what you've called me to. And like you said, it's not about being a slob, but that was the struggle that you were facing. And once you and if I'm understanding right, like once you realized it's not like you're a character issue, you're not a bad person. How can you take this to God, whatever it is? How can you take this to God and allow Him to help you in it, instead of you just trying to figure out how to gut it out and get up and clean your house every day? And for some reason, and I know, like, I'm not trying to be super woman based. There's a lot of men that are cleaning their homes and running their households. But for a woman, there's like this inner sense of identity of, we're supposed to do this. We're supposed to know innately how to do this. So I think somebody being real and saying, this is hard and this isn't quite how my brain works, I can understand why a lot of people would be drawn to that conversation.
If my weakness is, which it is, it's a reminder that I am not self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Then my weakness is a gift, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because understanding my inability to do this, whatever it is, on my own is a gift, because it brings me to God.
Yeah.
You know.
The people that don't struggle with that, the people that get up and make their bed and they dust everything even before they head out to work. I mean, there's some people that they just operate like that. And it's so easy for them to be like, you should be doing, like, I am not a nighttime dishwasher. Like I will, I don't, and I feel people judging me right now. Even though I shouldn't do that.
I'm not
But
judging you at
I
all.
will leave dishes.
Yeah.
When my coffee is making in the morning, I'll wash dishes. Like I like in the morning, it doesn't bother me to leave stuff in the sink overnight, and I'll get up in the morning and tidy everything up. But I am dead to the world by like 9:30, but I know that there are people even in my family that like, you got to wash the dish, and they don't judge me on it, but people just look at it very differently. So people that have a different struggle, or like people that don't have addiction problems, they're like,
Right.
well, just don't have addiction problems.
Well, I mean,
just
you
clean your
said the
house.
word just. I mean, that is like that's lesson number 1 when I train decluttering coaches. We don't use the word just.
Mhm.
Because by saying, oh, just do this, just do your dishes, just whatever. First of all, you may not know the whole story of what they're dealing with. And it may be, if you say just do the dishes, but they're picturing that every single dish in their entire kitchen is covering every single surface and blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah.
also, like, there's just more to I said, see, it's so easy to say, but, but there's more to it. And I love that you point that out because that really is the issue. And that's one of the main things I'm talking about in the new book that just came out is, the things that people who don't understand the legitimate struggle, they think they're being helpful, but often those things end up backfiring because, well, I mean, just for example, a lot of times people want to tell you why you should get your house cleaned up,
Right. Or
thinking
maybe
that
how their mama did it.
right. Thinking that the issue here is that you don't know why,
Yeah.
or that you are trying to motivate you to clean up your house. And you're like, I got all the motivation in the world. I can't do it. And so you acting like I don't have motivation makes me immediately feel misunderstood and is also not helpful. And so then,
Just overwhelming.
yeah, exactly. So that's where I come in with like, I know you want to. One of the things I say when I speak is, I'm not here to convince you to declutter, because if you showed up to listen to somebody talk about decluttering, I know that you want to declutter. I'm just going to teach you how to do it. And like every time I see tears
Oh,
because
yeah.
because people are so used to the person not understanding what they actually need and spending a bunch of time talking about the benefits of decluttering. And I'm like, you know,
Yeah.
just tell me how.
We
I
got
get
it.
it. Yeah.
And that's what I love about what you write and speak about. It's not just here's some like life hacks on how to manage your home and all of that. It's like it gets down into the emotional side of things. Like you've mentioned, I mean, even just sharing your story, fear, shame, frustration, being misunderstood, even like identity level type issues. So on that, like I wanted to ask, why does cleaning and organization and clutter seem like such a strong emotional issue for people? And then in what sense is it a spiritual issue? In what sense is it not a spiritual issue? Because I love how you talk about that in your book.
Yeah. I mean, so everything is a spiritual issue, right? I mean, like every single thing is something that God cares about and is, wants to be involved in. And yet, I do not believe that the struggle with clutter is a spiritual issue. Spiritual things can affect that. It can affect me spiritually, all that. But I, like you talked about as a woman, this is supposed to be a woman thing, right? Especially as a Christian woman, there are ideas and traditions that make it feel like this is what a Christian woman is supposed to look like. I mean, let's talk about Proverbs 31. I mean, like people use her in talking about cleaning, even though literally there is not a single word about cleaning or organization or anything that has to do with that in Proverbs 31. The reality is that the assumption by many people about someone who struggles in their home or has clutter is that clutter is the result of greed, or a messy house is the result of laziness or whatever. And then but the person who is struggling, I have not found that to be true in most cases. The vast majority of people who struggle with clutter out of a loving heart full of good intentions.
Right.
They have brought things into their home because of the ways they might be able to help somebody someday, the projects that they want to be able to do out of a sense of stewardship and frugality.
Yeah.
These things come into their home. And so they're doing these things out of a heart that is pure. And then they end up with so much stuff that they can't actually do those things.
Right.
And then the shame comes in because it just doesn't make sense. I did not understand that my issue was that I had more stuff than I could handle. I actually had more stuff than could actually fit in my house. But ultimately, like, I had to realize I can't handle all of this stuff. And so getting this stuff out, even though those things came in out of good intentions and the person who I might help someday and the project I might do, I wasn't able to help people and I wasn't able to do the projects because I was so overwhelmed by my home. Even if I did have an opportunity to use one of these things that I had collected at a garage sale for $1 when it, if somebody needed it new, they'd pay $100 and I got it for $1, so I'll have it for that.
Right. It's a good deal.
Exactly. Like I brought that in and then somebody needed it and I was like, I don't know which pile it's in. I
Yeah.
have a vague feeling that I might have something like that. And then that really brought so much shame. And then I thought I was bringing this in because of who I am, and then I'm not able to be that person. And so it just brings all of these identity issues
And
um,
guilt.
in there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. There's this thought that cluttered and all of that, like you said, I mean, you use the word slob, that I don't think people stop and think about, hey, these people have really good intentions. Like it may be a stewardship issue. I mean, there's someone in my life that has a lot of things that they have held on to. It's because they take care of what they have. And there's this assumption that if it's yours, you take care of it. You don't just give it away. That is kind of like not appreciating it. So you end up, amassing things or keeping hold of things, not because you're a slob. You might be incredibly neat and all of that. It just can get to be a little too much. It's weird how we can get so emotionally tied to things. I've moved, like, I think I'm at my 22nd address or something like that. I've moved a lot in my adult life and carrying things that were my grandma's that meant something to me. I have my great grandma's china cabinet. Like, I feel like I've had to pare down the things, that really mean something to me. But some things I've had to get rid of over the years because I couldn't afford to put things in storage. So trying to think, am I emotionally tied to this bowl? And now I'm going to have to keep that forever. Now, there are some bowls that were my great grandmother's, and I do have those and I'll have those forever. But I mentioned it to my nieces one day. I was like, give anything that's mine, you give it all away. Take it all to, you do
Well,
not have to be tied to any of my stuff.
yeah, I mean, I love that you brought that up because the reality is those emotions are real,
Yeah.
right? And I think that the idea, especially for the person who had this decluttering thing and organizing thing does not come naturally to us. The
Mhm.
idea is that if I'm going to declutter, it is going to mean ripping those things out of my heart,
Yeah. And
or
devaluing that or
yes,
that
exactly.
person.
It's going to mean I have to be a completely different person than who I am. So that was me. That was my experience. And so my process it acknowledges emotions, you get to feel them, but it doesn't use emotions to make your
Mhm.
decisions. So we make decisions based on, if you have your grandmother's bowl, the conversation is not, are you ever going to use it? How
Mhm.
much does it mean to you? Blah, blah, blah. The conversation is, if you needed your grandmother's bowl, where would you look for it first? Okay. And then you take it to that place and you
Mhm.
acknowledge the reality. Is there room for it here? If
Yeah.
there's not room for it here, am I willing to get rid of something else to make room for it? And that gives me these very concrete ways to make decisions about highly emotional things. Because when I take it to this place and I say, oh, there's no room for it, and I say, that's fine. What am I willing to get rid of? I go, there are these plastic bowls that I have actually always despised. I'm going to get rid of those and put those here. And it becomes very practical and very
Right.
fact based, but it allows me to feel the emotions. I always tell people, I'm like, you can keep anything, but you can't keep everything. Like
Yeah.
that's the defining factor. So it's like, if I love these bowls, they deserve space in my home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What deserves space less than these bowls?
Right.
Or but I also can go, if I want to keep every piece of dishware that my grandmother ever touched, which that's the thing that can, if you don't have these boundaries in place, then it's
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm going to keep these bowls, but that means I don't have room for any coffee cups. Okay, well, I always just carry it all the way out. I'm like, okay, well, you can drink your coffee out of that bowl. And then the ridiculousness of it, or, oh, you can
Yeah.
use the bowl instead of plates. Oh, well, you can use the bowl to mix things, but for a cake, you'd have to have 6 of them and blah, blah. So we just go ahead and go, it's fine. The answer is always yes. When I work with people, the beauty of my process is that, if I do say so myself, but the beauty of my process is that I get to always be the good guy. I am always like, of course, absolutely, you can keep that. Okay, where would you look for it first? Let's take it there. Okay, what are you willing to get rid of? Oh, I don't want to get rid of anything. Okay. All right, well, then let's donate it. I don't want to donate. Oh, of course you can keep it. What are you willing to get rid of? So it's just I get to be, instead of me saying that's a dumb bowl,
Yeah.
because that's what a lot of people are scared of, and they're scared to get help with their clutter
Right.
because that has been their experience. Maybe when their mom or their daughter or their friend came over to help them, and it was a value decision about every single item, and why do you like that, and why do you want it, and why do you even have that? I'm like, I don't ask the question why, and we don't use the word just, and like
Yeah.
that's you can keep anything, but you can't keep everything.
I think that's good.
As you coach and work with people, are there kind of like any common like misconceptions that people have when it comes to this process, or just like things they have to unlearn, about this, like when they're
So
going through
many.
this type of process?
So many, and they're all things I had to unlearn, so I understand it. So the main one I would say is what I call the container concept. And what I mean by that is I used to think that containers were for putting things in. I just knew organized people loved containers. And so they would get excited about containers. And I was like, that's the answer to my problem. And I would bring containers into my house, and my house never looked like their house, and really never looked even that much better. Right.
Mm-hmm.
As I was working one day during the time when I was just chronicling what I was doing in my house, I was talking to myself, and I was saying the word container, and it hit me. Oh, like the word contain is within the word container. And I went, okay, like firefighters work to contain a fire. They create a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they can keep the fire inside the boundary, they can keep it under control. If it goes outside the boundary, bad things happen, right? And I realized, a container's purpose is not to hold things. A container's purpose is to serve as a boundary. And when I look at containers in that way, it changes everything. That honestly is the biggest changing point for me in my home, was realizing that space is finite. I mean, who knew, right? But that so it's not just that every bucket is a container, but every drawer is a container, every cabinet, every shelf is a container. Ultimately, my house is a container. Like, so I can only keep what will fit usably, functionally in my house. And I have to have open space for the most important thing in my house, most important thing in my container, which is the people who live in it, right? Like, we need to be able to do the things that we need to do. And if stuff is getting in the way of that, then it's not an issue of, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Do I want it? Do I love it? There's not space for it. And that frees everything. So, for example, the sock drawer, right? I remember being at a mom's group when my kids were little, and there was a speaker on home stuff. And somebody said, well, what do you do when you get like a new pair of socks? And she said, oh, the 1 in, 1 out rule. And everybody was like, oh. And I was like, oh. But I had no idea what she was talking about. Like, because I was picturing my sock drawer. And my sock drawer, I was thinking, what good would it do to get rid of a pair of socks when I get a new one? Because my sock drawer won't close anyway. Like, that was my thought.
Yeah.
But when I realized, every space is a limit, then I realized, okay, so my sock drawer needs to be able to close. And so that means I get rid of my least favorites. I'm not having to go through every item and say, is this a good pair of socks? I just go, out of the ones in this drawer right now that won't close, what are my least favorites? And I take those out until it closes, and that's the end of that. I don't have to go through every single pair. And then when I get a new one, it makes sense that, okay, so when a new one comes in, an old one has to come out to make the space for it. And that's that container concept. And then when I would have looked at it before and gone, oh no, I love all these socks, but I have a new pair I just paid money for. Which pair do I like the least to make the space for it?
Right.
And that's when my brain goes, oh yeah, actually those fall down in my boots every time I wear them. So I can get rid of that. But there's just something freeing about it. So the thing people don't know that we don't know that we don't know is the container concept. And it's the thing that a lot of naturally organized people are like, you didn't know that? And it's the communication breakdown between someone who is naturally organized trying to help someone else, and they're talking about containers and they're thinking of them in completely different ways.
Yeah. And they get completely overwhelmed because like you said, for people that doesn't come naturally, I love to line things up. I love things to be in their spaces and, I love to organize. It's a part of the counseling process. When people come in and they've got a big unorganized story, thinking, okay, how do we deal with this? How do we put this into manageable pieces? What containers basically, either emotionally, spiritually, physically, whatever the situation that we're dealing with, how do we put this into a manageable place? But when it's the whole house or when it's the whole big story, we don't know, especially in the areas where they're not our strength. So if cleanliness or decluttering or those things aren't the natural strength, like you said, if they just knew it, then they would do it. But like you said, your brain doesn't work like that. I love that you're not saying, there are people who'll be like, well, that's just how I am. And somehow that you just get to stop there. That's just how I am. And so tell me about how you shifting your thought on this impacted your relationships. Maybe your relationship with your husband. We know a lot of times husbands might be like, well, my mom did it like this or something, there's their comparison. So how did, we know that you've kind of been set free in this. You can share this with a lot of people and it helps them get to freedom. Relationally, what was the impact?
Well, I do have to say the thing that I always say, because a lot of people will ask the relationship question from the perspective of how do I get the other person to change, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you deal with that a lot in counseling,
Right.
right?
That's always our first, even my own. I know that, but
Yes,
that's
yes.
still mine. Yeah.
So I always tell people, worry about your own clutter first, deal with your
Mhm.
own stuff first, because dealing with your own stuff will change your home, right? Like
Yeah.
you will experience improvement. It'll be easier to live in your house and they will experience that too. And then that will open them up in the future. Possibly, can't guarantee it, for them to also make changes. But I always have to make sure that I'm clear on that. But as far as with my husband, I didn't even tell him in the beginning that I had started this blog because
Mhm.
he knew I wanted to write. He knew I wanted to start a blog. But because I had tried to get my house under control so many times, and I had done it by saying, okay, here's my plan, family. Everything you know about how this house functions is going to change starting right now. Like,
We're all new people right
right,
now.
exactly.
Yeah.
But because it was a secret, because I was assuming I was going to fail, right? I couldn't do that this time. And I had to focus on myself and what I was doing and what I wasn't doing. And through that, saw the impact of what I was doing and wasn't
Mhm.
doing, right? And my house changed from that. And so it's helped me see, my husband will often say, he's like, he was always willing to help, but there were no routines.
Yeah.
And so because there were no routines and it was always me treating the dishes like a project because I'm good at projects, but or
Mhm.
the laundry like a big then he would run a load of dishes. He would do a load of laundry, but there wasn't a routine. And so it didn't feel like it had that big of an impact or
Yeah.
that was carried on to actually, build some progress. And so therefore that was disheartening for him when he would try to help, which made him less motivated to help. But,
Yeah.
but as I got routines down, he was like, could see, oh, if the dishwasher runs at night, then she can keep things under control. And I'm not saying it has to be run at night. I'm just saying
Right.
because if you want to do it in the morning, that's when you should do it. I'm great with that.
Yeah.
But really, truly, I'm like, whenever it works for you is when you should do it. But he saw
Yeah.
this is what is helpful. If this will run, so he generally is the one who starts the dishwasher because he knows if I do this, this is what works for Dana and works, well for her and keeps things going. So it's that going ahead and doing the thing and bringing people in on it who were in your
Yeah.
family because it is legitimately challenging to have kids. It is legitimately challenging to live in a home with other people, but I also wouldn't want to not have them there, right? And
Right.
so yes, it's challenging, and yet the answer is not to say everybody else needs to be on the same page as me before we even
Right.
start. Go ahead and start and then bring them in on that.
I think that's so beautiful. Here's what I love about that, like in that small picture and in the big scale of picture. A lot of times we want to make some big declaration. My boss used to say, don't tell them what you're going to do, tell them what you did. When we would report on ministry stuff, he wouldn't say, tell them we're going to do this and this and this month. Next month, let's say we did that, that, and that, because things change. And a lot of times we think that if we make some big declaration like, oh, I'm going to get, organized and we're going to do this and we line everything up, we're setting ourselves up for failure because it's not sustainable. Like you said, all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to rise and fly. Everybody, we're going to totally change, starting tomorrow. And that just puts so much pressure on ourselves and on others. But in anything, whether it is getting better at our house or, our quiet time or whatever it is that we're wanting to work on, if we go to the Lord in that, and He's like our first stop, and we even quietly talk with Him about it. Today, help me see this differently. Today, help me be set free that my identity isn't in if my dishes are done overnight or in the morning. Help me, to honor you and glorify you today. And here's some things, Lord, that I would like this to be different. I feel some impact in this, and I don't like how this feels, and I don't know how to fix it. Like when we take all of these things to God and we start slowly and quietly with Him, then, like you said, your husband's going to start to see, oh, this is what works. And we can bring others along, whether it's this line or anything. I mean, that's part of just the goodness of God. Like, let's be still and quiet with Him and take it to Him first. And He starts to change us and set us free of feeling like, oh, if I don't do this, I'm not a good woman, or I'm not a good Proverbs 31 woman, or if I don't do this, I'm not living up to some standard. It's daunting. Expectations can be so daunting. I mean, that's what was so unique about what you shared at the conference and about your book. I mean, I love that He doesn't care about your messy house. He cares about your heart. So tell us your kind of elevator pitch, or longer than that, but just tell us why did you shift from kind of the structure of here's how you do this, one bite at a time, to this is a heart issue and Jesus is caring about your heart. How did you get to that, the latest book?
Yeah, my first 3 books do not have any spiritual content on purpose, because the mixing of spiritual content for Christian women with how to get your house under control, especially for the person like me who those methods didn't work for me, then it became this spiritual failure, right? And so
Mhm.
it made me scared to read books like that. It made me scared to hear anything like that. So as God showed me, Dana, this is not a spiritual failure. It's just your struggle. There are ways, and I made you the way that you are on purpose. There are ways for you to get this under control. But it is
Yeah.
I've not been waiting for you to get your house under control so I could use you, right? Like
Right.
I love you and can use you and all that before that. So I didn't want to mix that in with the other ones, but I do think that the shame piece of this issue is very real.
Mhm.
And I get emails from people every day, and I would say the vast majority who tell me I finally made the progress that I've always wanted to make. Part of their email is because I finally feel understood, because I finally realize there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with me. That understanding of the shame being gone, and maybe y'all know who this quote is, but somebody told me once that in order to be ready to change, you have to feel accepted as you already are. Like this
Mhm.
idea that like feeling understood is so incredibly powerful
Yeah.
in removing that shame, and not feeling alone is so incredibly powerful. And so I wanted to address the issue of shame, but as a believer, and my faith is the reason,
Yeah.
is the what takes my shame away. And so I really wanted to talk about that. And I'll just be completely honest. God has provided me a platform, and my faith is the only thing that ultimately matters. And I wanted to share that. I wanted to share my faith for my audience members who are not believers, but know me
Mhm.
and feel that we're friends. But I also really wanted to address head on this issue for Christian women that, the cleanliness is next to godliness, the Proverbs 31, the God is a God of order. Like, I go into all of those things and like, what does the Bible actually say? And how have these things been misused to
Right.
try to encourage Christian women to have a perfect home? And yet it ends up backfiring for those of us who struggle, because if you tell me
Yeah.
that cleanliness is next to godliness and I have tried and tried and tried and my house is a disaster, well, then if that's true, I must be like so far from God, so it's like, let's talk about
Right.
how that is not true and why it's not true and why it's dangerous. So this is the completing piece of all of this, but also it was really important to me to share my faith to those who that is the real source of hope, right? Is
Yeah.
our relationship with Jesus.
I love that. That's so good. Shame is the biggest jerk in town.
My goodness. And it's
The
not
biggest jerk.
motivating.
Mm-mm.
It is
No.
not motivating. And so when people try to motivate by making you feel shame, even if, whether or not they are purposely making you feel shame, that's defeats the
Doesn't
purpose.
help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got to say, in your book, you do a tremendous job of dismantling all of those ideas of cleanliness is next to godliness, the Proverbs 31 stuff, the God is a God of order and things like that. I love that bit you have too about one of the first rough interactions Jesus has with the Pharisees is over an issue of cleanliness and the disciples washing their hands, and just the way you kind of work through that of like it's a cleaning issue, and Jesus is like you're making this man-made tradition into a much bigger deal than what it actually is. Like you think cleaning is somehow equating with godliness or something. It was just a brilliant way of kind of breaking down all these ideas and reminding us that God cares about our heart.
Which is such a I felt like that was such a gift, that passage. I was like, did you do this just for me, God, for this book? It's such the perfect example. Obviously, that's the example God chose, right? I get it. He's the perfect one. But because cleaning is such a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's necessary, because you need to wash your hands before you eat, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
I am never going to argue that,
Right.
but don't make it a spiritual issue,
Yeah.
because when you make that a spiritual issue, it causes frustration and confusion. And I think that nuance is so important. Like you were talking about, like it doesn't, me saying God made me this way is not me saying, oh, well, I'm
Right.
just going to live in squalor.
Everybody lump it.
But it's actually freedom for me to do the thing that I always wanted to do and that I needed to do because I accepted that God made me this way. Like it's, yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny how, I mean, it's not ha funny, but like tragically funny. Um, I've heard a couple of times lately, like you just need to have grace for yourself, and how, it's almost like we have two options, either shame or grace. Like I'm either going to, a couple of weeks ago, there was a water leak in my apartment building and it, flooded in my bedroom. So the carpets and everything had to move. And the guys that had been in there working left it just a total mess on the floor. And then I had to travel. And so I was gone for like 5 days, and furniture was moved, bedding, clothes had been taken out of drawers so that I could move furniture because I was trying to do all that. And it was like that for nearly 2 weeks. I was traveling and then trying to get back, and work was super busy. And I felt like, it just felt bad for several. And then finally thinking, okay, I do want this all set back right. And there was a Saturday coming where I was going to be able to have time to do that. And if I could just in the meantime, before I could get to Saturday, when it was going to be time for me to take care of things, if I could just not hate myself in between then and Saturday, if I could actually practice the grace that I would 1,000 times over say to somebody else, like, you're busy, like, you're going to be able to mop the floors, like, it's okay, but I started to think I'm supposed to do this. I think it's the getting started, and it's the thinking, do I have grace for myself, or am I going to continue to shame me? And what would the voice of God the Father who loves me, what would he be saying? I mean, so that we can organize it and put it in the containers, the moments, the days, even if a day is a container. Today is a day that I can fix this or adjust this. I just think so many people are set free by your message. And I think that it's almost weird that I've never heard of people talking about this in a godly, spiritual way from a freedom standpoint. People have like the God diets and the God do this, which a lot of times ends up feeling a little bit shame-filled, because if you were righteous, if you were spiritual, you would get a handle on how you clean, how you eat, how you parent, all of those things. But I just love the grace that your perspective brings to it, because it feels like you truly see people because you allowed God to set you free in it. You allowed him to see you to where you didn't feel that shame. So it's very unique. And I love that we got to hear from you on Hope Talks today to kind of share a bit of that.
One final question I want to ask, just as like a final encouragement for anyone listening who, does struggle with clutter, organization, things like that. Not just like what would kind of your first step be and things like that, but also like, is there any just like big mistake that people make when they, start to hear this kind of message? Like, because I could see people going, all right, I'm going to take the next week off of work and I'm just going to go to town. So is there something to kind of avoid doing? And then is there kind of like a first step maybe
Absolutely.
that you encourage people with?
I mean, basically what you said is the exact thing that I teach how to avoid, right? Is like the big thing. So first thing that I teach that is very different from most people who talk about this stuff. I thought that to declutter, you had to pull everything out of a space, because that is what most of the experts will tell you to do, is pull everything out of the space, just put back the things that you want. Well, the reality is I would pull things out of a space and I would think, that looks amazing, totally empty, right? And then I would turn around and I would see the piles of things that I had put out everywhere, and I would shut down out of complete overwhelm, or I would work as hard as I could and I would try to push through, and life would happen. Either things happened or my energy left or my emotional energy was gone or whatever, and I would shut down. And then the house was torn apart for weeks, months, or I just shoved everything back in. And now where I kind of knew where things were, now it's all just a big pile in there, right? So the thing to avoid is pulling everything out. The way to get started is the antidote to that. So I have a 5-step process. I call it the no mess decluttering method, meaning I'm never going to create piles. I'm never going to create a bigger mess. And I won't go into all of it, obviously. But the first step is trash. So a lot of times people are like, duh, of course trash should be gone. Like, who has trash? Everybody has trash. But the thing that happens when you are starting, because we're going to go one item at a time, final decision about that item, act on that final decision so I can stop at any time. Knowing I can stop at any time is usually the thing that lets me get started, right? Because I don't have to predict this huge amount of time taken off a week from work, right? So I look at the space and I go, is there any trash? Even if I'm sure there's not any, I'm still going to look, because now I'm looking at individual items instead of the pile, where the pile is overwhelming because I know there's important stuff in there and it feels like that means everything in the pile is important. But I say, is there any trash? And I'm going to go ahead and throw that in the trash or the recycling that's right here with me. Now I'm seeing individual items. My brain starts to adjust to what I'm going to have to be dealing with. Or before I was scared to look, now I'm looking with this purpose of what is trash, meaning decision-free, non-emotional trash. Like if I have to ask myself if it's trash, that's not what I'm talking about. Is there any obvious trash? And then as I'm doing that, now I know what I'm dealing with, and things start to I mean, y'all are the counselors, so you would know, right? Like things start to shift when it's no longer the unknown. Right. And so the next step that I go all the way through the 5 steps, I am ready for that because of this simple step of looking for trash, even if there isn't any, but there always is some.
That's so good. That's so good. It takes it from clean your house to Is this
Step one.
something I
Yeah.
can throw away or not throw away?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's manageable. That's a great first
Yeah,
step.
like you're gradually kind of taking more and more control instead of feeling like, oh, this is hopeless and out
Yeah.
of control.
I like
So
it.
I love
I
that.
can throw this tube of lipstick that's 10 years old away. It's
Yeah. Well, I always tell people that the goal is not to have the space decluttered. The goal is better. We're going to shift that. So
I like
if
that.
my goal is better, if I do one single thing, I have succeeded at this goal.
Mhm.
And so shifting my goal that way and my process of decluttering to, I'm going to start with the trash, means that I'm like, it is worth it to me to look at this space and throw away 3 pieces of trash. Worth my time. I
Yeah.
have been successful. I'm not done, but I have succeeded at decluttering because I've gotten rid of something. And all those years where I had this big vision of what my goal was, I want this magazine-worthy home. But I was way over here. I never made any progress because this goal was so daunting. But when I
Yeah.
changed my goal to better, I ended up getting over here where I
Yeah.
wanted my house to be. But it was because I felt success and experienced success all along the way. And that's when my house actually changed, even though it feels counterintuitive. It feels like you're kind of like, oh, well, that's not enough to say that it's successful to throw away 3 pieces of trash. But while I'm saying that's not enough, I'm not throwing away the 3 pieces of trash. And my house is staying in bad shape. More trash is being added. I'm more overwhelmed. Then the goal seems farther away and all that. So
Yeah. I really like that. Set a goal that you can actually do.
yeah, better's the goal.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love that. I love that.
All right. Well,
Better's the goal.
Better is the goal.
I like that.
I love this conversation. I am so grateful for you and the things you write and speak on. I do want to just share a couple links and things for people who want to dive a little deeper. slobcomesclean.com to find kind of some of the writing and books and everything there. Also, you have a wonderful YouTube channel and podcast that you can check out. And I would encourage you to check out all of Dana K. White's books.
Dana K. White. That's what you
again,
Google.
yeah, like a number of them are on kind of the actual kind of cleaning and organization type of things. But definitely check out the latest one. Jesus doesn't care about your messy house. He cares about your heart. I love that because, like we've said, it gets on more of the shame and the grace and just the emotional side of things and God's heart on the issue. So
Yeah, that's so great.
I'm going to ask Haley to close us out in prayer. And Dana, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord. We do thank you for your grace. Thank you for giving wisdom and a clarity to Dana that she can share that message with others, that we can hear, God, that you have hope for us, that we can set a goal, God, that really starts us in a direction of better. So for the people that are hearing this message today, God, I do pray that you would begin to just relax their shoulders and help affirm in them that your love for them is not contingent on how messy their house is or how not messy their house is, God, that we don't take pride in when we clean our dishes or don't clean our dishes, God, but that you are always looking to our heart. You know, God, why certain things are a struggle. You understand if it's our creativity or if we just get overwhelmed and just need a place to start. So thank you, God, for bringing such a message to Dana because, we can say, oh, a messy house and clutter is not a big deal, but God, it is a noose around so many necks. People feel so bad about themselves and about their homes at times, God. So we just pray, Lord, that anyone that's hearing, God, that you would begin to shed a light on this for them, that they would reach into some more of the teaching, God. I pray that you would continue to expand her work, expand the audience of her books, God, expand your grace through her and through the teaching, Lord, that she has been vulnerable and transparent and committed to sharing with others, Lord. Lord, we just thank you for this time. And like I said, for your grace in all things. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to Hope Talks and follow along each week. We'd also love for you to leave a rating and review. This will help others more easily find the podcast. Thanks for your support and tune in next week.